Welcome to the second episode of this series. Today we're going to discuss Surah 4, verse 157, and show how this verse on its own debunks the standard Islamic narrative entirely. As we are doing in this series, we are showing hadiths, tafsir, al-Tabari, reliance of the traveler, or anything else that we need in order to show how this narrative was fabricated. Now, as we go through this series, remember this map. This is a map approximately of the early Islamic Empire during the Umayyads. In the very next screen, we are going to see a map of what was 100 years prior Christendom. So remember, all of these lands became Islamic in no time at all. But 100 years prior, the majority of those lands were Christendom. All of these people were very familiar with the stories of Jesus, both the canon and also apocryphal stories, although it is coming to light that the apocryphal stories were not as popular as we are led to believe now in the 21st century. In every map that you will see about Christendom, the lands of Saudi Arabia, or the Arabian Peninsula rather, they will show as being pagan, but more and more evidence is coming out that that's not the case, and they had also been Christianized. Which means is everybody in these lands, and this is a very conservative approach because we know that there were Christians pretty much everywhere, but these were, say, the main kingdoms. They were very familiar with the stories. And one of the stories that everybody was very aware of was the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Therefore, if you go from this map to this map in just about 100 years, the question that everybody would have for this new belief is what happened on the cross, right? It's as simple as that. You cannot just go to all of these lands and then say, hey, you are saying that Jesus was crucified? Well, he wasn't, okay? Trust me, bro. And people, after hundreds of years of tradition, in the case of Christians, and in the case of Jews, they would have been hundreds of years saying, well, yeah, he was crucified, but he was just a false prophet, right? So everybody was very aware of the crucifixion. And we are meant to believe that a guy appears and says, he wasn't, trust me, bro, God told me, don't ask me for any miracles to prove that I listen to God or anything of the sort, right? That is insane. Remember these two maps. Everything that we see, like the previous verse, the one of Mary, sister of Aaron, you have to put it through this lens, that people were very aware of what the Judeo-Christian traditions were. So now, let's have a look at what we learn from this verse. First, this is basically what it says. And they're saying, surely we have killed the Messiah, Isa, the son of Mary, the apostle of Allah. And they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them. And most surely, those who differ therein are only in doubt about it. Hang on a minute. This is not denying the crucifixion. Quite the opposite. This is affirming the crucifixion. They are saying that someone was on the cross. They saw Jesus being crucified because it appeared to them. They saw it. They were there. They saw something. It is only by the time that we get to the Quran that we get the, oh, trust me, bro, but it wasn't him. Trust me, bro. I know full well. By the way, 2 verses later, or probably the next verse, is when Allah says, or rather the Quran says, Allah took him up. I have just recently come across the pseudo gospel of Peter, which actually uses the same expression. So anyone who studies the apocryphal stories, please get in touch. Let me know if you actually got your hands in the original, which was written in Greek, and see if we can join the dots. It's possible that this story was actually inspired by the pseudo gospel of Peter. But anyway, let's see what the traditions say about this. We know the Quran says it looked to them like Jesus was right there on the cross, but it wasn't him. Remember the map? Everybody would have asked the question, so what was happening? What do you mean it appeared to them? And before we move on, you would have heard Muslims come up with very different explanations. It resembled to him, it was the shadow, it was this, it was that. There would have been one explanation. Everyone would have asked Muhammad what happened, and he would have said what happened, and there wouldn't be any alternative stories. But let's see what the tafsir writers say. Let's begin with Ibn Abbas. We have here that there was a guy who was destroyed by Allah, whatever that means. His name was Tatianos. So Allah made Tatianos look like Jesus, and so they killed him instead of Jesus. So Tatianos being a bad guy, and he's the one who somehow gets destroyed by Allah, but then he takes the place of Jesus. Remember, now we have Ibn Abbas explaining that on the cross, when they saw Jesus, it wasn't Jesus, it was Tatianos. Thank you, Ibn Abbas. All right, what else have we got here? Let's have a look. It is said that God caused the one who slandered Jesus to resemble him, and he was killed. It is also said that Jesus said, "Whoever agrees to have my resemblance cast upon him, so that he is killed in my instead." So one of the companions agreed. Now, once again, we have two different stories from a tafsir writer. Remember, everyone would have asked the question and they would want one answer. First, who is the one that slandered Jesus? This is exegeted by some people as Judas. And if you will go there, but it looks like making the connection between this and Judas happens much later, hence why I didn't bring it up here on screen. If you have a hadith or tafsir or something else that makes it clear that it was Judas, let me know. I just saw that it was a much later tradition, but maybe you find an earlier one. But it is almost common knowledge, and you will still find Muslims who will say Judas is the one who was on the cross. But at the same time, this tafsir writer, whose job is to tell us what happened on the cross, he also says, no, it was one of the companions. Jesus said, who agrees to do this? And then one of the companions said, hey, it will be me. It looks like they got tired of insulting Muhammad, and then they tried to insult everyone else by saying that Jesus asked one of the companions to take his place on the cross. Let's go to Ibn Kathir. Once again, now we have that story in a lot more detail. He then asks, who volunteers that his image appears as mine and be killed in my place? He will be with me in paradise, blah, 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 blah. Then the young man volunteered again. So there is one of the companions, a young man, who keeps asking, it will be me, it will be me. And Jesus keeps saying, not you, not you. After he asks again, and then Jesus says, you will be that man. And the resemblance of Isa was cast over that man. Even according to Islamic traditions, Jesus was sinless. Does this sound like the actions of a sinless man? This is nonsense. And then we get a little bit of an insight as to what nonsense is in here. And you see, I have added, contrast this with Surah 355. In Surah 355, the Quran says that those who follow Jesus will be superior to those who disbelieve until the day of judgment. In fact, God would make that happen. So Ibn Kathir here explains that there were groups that say believed in Jesus. We have Jacobites, we have Nestorians, and then we had Muslims. So the servant and messenger of Allah remained with us as long as Allah willed. So this is now Muslims speaking, of course, not Christians. And then Allah took him to him. The two disbelieving groups, So now we're talking about Jacobites and Nestorians disbelieving in the Muslims. Well, in Jesus according to this. So they cooperated against the Muslim group and they killed them. Until, of course, Muhammad came back and set the record straight by saying, "Trust me, bro." Do you see the problem? This is how they're trying to make the book still be divine, despite of all of the problems with it. Surah 355 says those who believe in Jesus would be superior until the day of judgment, apart from other problems with the verse, of course. And in here, he has to shoehorn, no, those were the Muslims. Those who believed that Jesus was what? Taken up? And then the other two groups said, no, he was actually crucified. But we have seen the Quran. It says that they saw Jesus on the cross. They just couldn't understand who that was until the Muslims came later and explained it was Tatianos, and also the one that slandered him, and also one of the apostles. Do you see the problem, how they're making all of these things up? Anyway, so it was good to actually show that even Kathir doesn't understand what a Christian is by saying that Muslims, they were there, which breaks Surah 355 and all of that nonsense. Anyway, let's carry on and see what else we find. Maududi, the legendary Maududi. So, those who have differed, and then he writes the Christians, they do not agree in their versions of crucifixion. It's like, no, hang on a minute. It's quite simple. Christians means one very specific thing, and the Christians do not disagree on the crucifixion. They will disagree on some matters, such as whether you are okay to have an image of Jesus or images or, iconoclasm and these sort of things. But no one says anything against the crucifixion if they are Christians. So if you say, I'm a Christian, but I actually think that Jesus was not crucified, it's like, no, you're not a Christian, period. You have just started your own heresy. Do not call yourself Christian. That term is taken. The thing is, he's saying that those who differed are the Christians. And when we are going through the Islamic sources, we see that it is the Muslims who differed. So far, we've got Tatianos, the one who slandered Jesus, one of the apostles, and there will be more. Who are the ones who differed? I think it is obvious. And by the way, that is not even what it means in the Arabic. Anyway, that is a discussion for some other time. So, and then he goes, one version is that the person who was crucified was not Jesus, but someone who bore his likeness. Basically, someone who actually looked like him, just like that, whom the Jews and the Romans had disgracefully put on the cross, while Jesus was standing nearby and laughing at their folly. Are you finding this setting? Because you should. So here we have Maududi saying that one of the versions was Jesus was not on the cross, there was someone else who simply looked like him, and Jesus was nearby laughing at that. Really? And then he continues. Another version is that the one who was nailed to the cross was Jesus, but he did not die on the cross and was alive when he was taken from it. What? What Christians would say Jesus did not die on the cross? This is nonsense. And those are the ones that differ. Some others say that he died on the cross but came to life afterwards. He died on the cross and then he came to life afterwards. Yeah, that's actually called the Christians. He died on the cross, he resurrected on the third day. All of the other things in here, it's nonsense. It is noise. In order to say that the Christians are wrong, he's just saying, well, they all disagreed about it. They have no idea what they are talking about. It's like, well, it would be nice if the Muslim sources told us what happened. But instead of that, what we have is people saying, well, some people say this, some people say this, some people say this. But it is their sources, the Islamic sources, that have all of this confusion in there. There is no confusion in Christianity. You can go to the Gnostics and they will have a different interpretation. They're not Christians. So that some say that he died and then came to life afterwards. Okay, and it continues. There are still others who say that after his death, Jesus came to life with his body and was raised with his body. Do you see how Maududi is just trying to come up with all of the different iterations of the answer and just throw everything in there? Well, he did die. Well, he didn't die. Well, it was somebody else. Well, it was the body. No, it was the soul. Well, it was both. But then he came back and then he was taken. But also he was not taken. And also it's like, will you just shut up and tell us what happened? Remember, this is the question everybody would have been asking. Obviously, if the Christians had any knowledge of the truth, they would not have given so many different versions of it. That's actually because they didn't give all of those many different versions of it. This is the Islamic sources making things up and also taking explanation from heresies, from Gnostics, and from everybody else, not the Christians. And then Maududi destroys Islam on his own. Well done. Maybe he was not paid well enough. When then he says, but the Quran is silent about the nature and details of the matter and does neither say explicitly whether Allah raised him body and soul together from the earth to some place in heaven, nor that he died like other mortals and only his soul was raised to heaven. Thank you very much. Maududi is showing, and we're going to see more of this, where the Quran contradicts itself by not giving explanations of something that everybody could have asked about. And we see the tafsir writers making everything up. And we continue still with our very good friend Maududi. This verse is explicit on the point that the Prophet Jesus was rescued from crucifixion. All right, so we have established that. A comparative study of the Quran and the Bible shows that most probably it was Jesus himself who stood his trial in the court of Pilate, who sentenced him to death. All right, Maududi did not get the memo that according to your traditions, to the Islamic traditions, the Bible is corrupt and you cannot trust it. Therefore, he should not be comparing the Bible when he cannot trust it according to their sources is corrupt, and the Quran. But also, he's just contradicting what we read earlier, because he's saying that Jesus would be the one who stood trial. Do you remember the explanation that before Jesus was captured, he asked one of the apostles, who will take my place? And then one volunteers. That guy goes through the trial, the punishment, and the crucifixion. We get to Maududi. Actually, it was probably him. Yeah, he went through trial. Or are you going to shoehorn that? No, he stood trial, but then when he was in prison, another miracle happened, and then he was replaced. Are we going to go through this nonsense? Okay, this is what happened. All right, cool. Let's actually see what happened. Thank you, Maududi, for explaining everything for us. Okay. Pilate knew fully well that Christ was innocent and had been brought in his court out of jealousy. This is actually taken from the Quran, out of jealous animosity for themselves. Not about Muhammad, but about Jesus. So he asked the crowd whether Jesus Christ should be released on the occasion of the festival of Barabbas, a notorious robber. But the high priest and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for the release of Barabbas and for the crucifixion of Jesus. Incredible. He is quoting the Bible so far. Do you see this? In order to explain the Quran, he's going to the Bible. And then he's going to do a U-turn to explain that, no, actually, I'm taking all of this from the Bible, but when it gets to this point, let me just make up something else. Let's continue. After this, God, who can do any and everything he wills, raised Jesus to himself and rescued him from crucifixion. Maududi takes from the Bible what he likes, and then he draws a line and tries to explain the very confusing verse away, selling the lunacy that the Quran happens to be divinely inspired. He continues, and the one who was crucified afterwards was somehow or other taken for Chris. Who the hell is Chris? Yeah, you see, this is probably just in the translation. It wouldn't happen in the Arabic, but I found it funny. Who the heck is Chris? But you see what is happening here. He is taking from the Bible, okay, so this thing happened, and then he goes and he's sentenced, and then he goes to the cross, and all of this, and but then no, God just rescued him. And the one on the cross somehow was other than Jesus. How? Somehow, nobody knows. The very clear verse. Everybody would have asked the question, so who was on the cross? And so far, Tatianos, someone who slanders Jesus, could be Tatianos, only Allah knows, and also one of the apostles. And now we know it's certainly not Chris, okay? If there is one thing you need to learn from this episode is Chris was not crucified. Okay, good. So, as regards the matter how it was made doubtful for them that they had crucified Jesus, we have no means of ascertaining. So now we have our very good friend Maududi throwing Islam under the bus. Therefore, it is not right to base on mere guesswork and rumors an answer to the question how the Jews were made to believe that they had crucified him. So we can see very clearly the Quran is saying they saw someone on the cross, they saw him, it appeared to them, but it wasn't Jesus. Trust me, bro. We get to the answers. Well, let's look at the Bible. The thing with Barabbas did happen, but then we have to. It was Judas or Tianos, or it was an apostle. Trust me, bro. Something happened. The most important question in the whole book would be: was Jesus God or not? Did he die and resurrect? Yes or no? People would be asking questions about this new prophet, and we are not getting an answer. We continue then with our very good friend Maududi. If you enjoy uncovering the truths behind Quranic verses, mistranslations, fabricated hadiths and tafsirs, hit the like button and subscribe now. And stay tuned for the next exposés. Thank you. Now, on with the show. First, the belief in the ascension of the prophet Jesus, body and soul together, was already prevalent among the Christians, so he knows about Christians. The thing is that, of course, it's about resurrection and then ascension. But in spite of it, the Quran not only has not clearly refuted it, but has used the same word, ascension, for the incident that Christians use for it. So here Maududi is realizing that when the Quran is talking about Jesus ascending, and then the Christians say Jesus ascended, the problem that they have in between is about, did he die on the cross for your sins? Did he resurrect? Those are the two things that they are contested. And the answer is, trust me, bro, and then you see all of the tafsir writers trying to come up with any explanation. Any explanation that still keeps the Quran being divine. Yeah, good luck with that. So the Quran would not have used such what? Ambiguous words. Oh, so I suppose that the verse that talks about Jesus not being crucified was not one of the very clear verses. Wow, Allah really likes to create confusion. And then he goes on and on to explain why the whole thing about the ascension was miraculous. So the second point, had Allah meant by the words used in verse 158 that Allah caused his death, or that Allah raised him in rank, as some of the translators try to explain away, more explicit words would have been used. In the first case, more appropriate words would be, Maududi thinks about more appropriate words. No doubt they did not slay him nor crucified him, but Allah rescued him alive from them and then gave him natural death. So there are articles, even from people who have studied this for a long time, saying clearly, yeah, Jesus died. According to the Quran, it uses the word tawafa. It says what it says. In other verses, 355 and 517, those verses make it clear that the authors of the Quran believe that Jesus died. They have to make it up by saying, okay, so it has to be a natural death. It has to be in his sleep. It has to be anything and everything except for Jesus dying for your sins, resurrecting, and then going up to the heavens. That is what has to be denied, but the Quran provides no answers except a very big trust me bro and a ridiculous amount of stories that contradict one another. The third, if the incident related here meant merely the natural death of Jesus, the words "and Allah is all powerful and all wise" after it would be meaningless. These words can be appropriately used only in connection with some extraordinary manifestation of the power and wisdom of Allah. Do you think it's wise to make people think that the guy on the cross was Jesus? Where is the explanation that it didn't? Did God then send Jesus back down and said to the apostles, hey, don't worry, okay? It wasn't me. It was Tatianos. It was Tatianos there, don't worry. Don't go and start a new religion or anything. Don't get crazy, guys. Just calm down. But hang on a minute. Didn't we read that one of the apostles volunteered? If one of the apostles volunteered, Jesus was asking everybody, all of the apostles, and one of them volunteers. All of the other ones would have known the one on the cross was not Jesus, it was one of the apostles. And what the Bible would be saying now is that those people would not have gone to their bloody deaths saying, Jesus was on the cross, he died, he resurrected. We saw him. We ate fish with him. They wouldn't have said that, would they? If they knew that the guy on the cross was one of their own. Nonsense. And when we get to al-Tabari, which I'm not going to read all of this, but I will leave the references here so you can go and read them on your own good time if you so wish. We see that when we get to al-Tabari, they follow something similar to Maududi, which is, let's go to the Bible, let's take everything that we come from the Bible, and then let's draw the line at Jesus being the one on the cross. That's all. He will just keep going on and on, taking all of the stuff from the Bible, other traditions. There you have it. I'll read just this little bit. Why are you weeping? They said, because of you. Whereupon he replied, God raised me up to himself, and nothing but good has happened to me. Only a likeness was shown to them. Hang on a minute. So now in al-Tabari, one of the stories was that when Mary Magdalene and the other women are on the tomb weeping, Jesus appears and says, don't worry, I'm fine. Look at me. Look at me. I'm absolutely fine. That was nothing. That was just a vision, right? Because God raised me up and now he has actually brought me down. And then we have all of the apostles going to their bloody deaths saying, no, he did actually die and resurrect and we saw him. So we see in al-Tabari that he takes everything from the Bible and then he draws the line and changes topic and goes, no, but let's actually shoehorn this thing that Jesus said to his people it wasn't me. We look at the Bible, and it says very clearly, yes, it was him. Do you see the nonsense? And there is more. Here you have a few more stuff taken from al-Tabari. Actually, let's read this one. According to this guy, which is an impeccable authority. Ooh, we like impeccable authorities. God allowed Jesus, the son of Mary, to die at 3 o'clock in the day. Then he took him unto himself. Right. My man, you have just apostatized because you cannot say that Jesus died. But this is what he's saying. God allowed Jesus to die. By the way, this is the biblical account. When Jesus says, no one can take my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down. I have the authority to pick it up. This I have received from my Father. This is the biblical account. Interesting. Then, according to that guy, well, another guy, the Christians assert that God granted him death for 7 hours of the day and then resurrected him, saying, descend upon Mary Magdalene on her mountain. For nobody wept for thee as she did, nor did anybody grieve for thee as she did. Again, why is al-Tabari quoting the Bible and then denying the bits that are not convenient? Do we see what we have seen so far? Okay, we will get to a summary in just a second. Then God raised Jesus unto himself, gave him wings of an angel, and dressed him in radiance. No longer did Jesus relish food or drink. He was flying along with the angels around the throne. Okay. So I suppose this guy knew that Jesus is the angel of the Lord, and they just took things to the next level. He was human and angelic. Ooh, this guy's in trouble. Celestial and terrestrial. The apostles then dispersed as commanded. The night on which he was sent down is celebrated by the Christians with frankincense. Yeah, Al-Qadr. So, no, Al-Qadr is the birth of Jesus. We've discussed that one. But they're still saying that Jesus dies and then he is sent down to the apostles and so on. And it's like, yeah, therefore the Bible is telling the story. These people would not then say, okay, let's change the story and say that he in fact did these things himself. And that one in there, you can actually just read it in your own good time. Is a good read, all of these different accounts gathered by al-Tabari. And a few more, actually. Oh, then there is this account as well in there. You can find this. Here you have the reference for the pages. So they find something that they cannot recognize, right? These people. This is a story that is being told. As I found nobody who recognized it, I think it's an inscription, it says in there, I threw it under a coffer we had, and there it lay for years. Then people from Mar in Persia came to us looking for pearls, and I said to them, do you have a script? Yes, they said. I brought out the stone for them, and lo and behold, they read it. It wasn't their script. This is the tomb of Jesus, son of Mary, God's messenger to the people of this land. There were its people at that time. Among them he died, so they buried him on the mountaintop. Yet more stories. Al-Tabari was doing a very good job at confusing everybody. And a lot more there. I'll keep it on the screen for a second, where he's talking about the king not knowing who he was, blah, blah, blah. You can read that on your own good time. He's then talking about Sergius, by the way. There might be a connection there. And the final section. So in here, then again, the stories gathered by al-Tabari, they mention that the man who was taken for Jesus and crucified was a Jew called Joshua, son of Pandera. The reign of Tiberius lasted a little over 23 years, over 18 years before the ascension of Jesus and 5 thereafter. So it looks like al-Tabari knew quite a lot of stuff. It looks like they took a lot from the Bible. And think about it. What have we learned today? We have learned that according to the Islamic traditions, the one question everybody would have asked is, so what happened on the cross? Did Jesus die for my sins and then resurrected to show that he was good at his word? Or was there something else? And what we get is that it was Tatianos on the cross. It was he who slandered Jesus, maybe Tatianos. Some people exegete that as Judas. We also get that it was one of the apostles. We also get that they just got someone, the Jews and the Romans got someone who resembled Jesus, who actually looked like him. And Jesus was standing nearby, laughing. We also get Joshua. The one question everybody would have asked is the one question nobody answered. These stories had nothing to do with the origins of the Quran. The Quran was very Christian, as we have shown countless times here on the channel. It is much later when they have to make up excuses for what the book actually says. And we see the results in the hadiths, in the tafsirs, in al-Tabari, and so on and so forth. So I hope this breakdown puts to rest how the narrative was created and why when you speak with a Muslim, he will swear that it is one thing, and that is whatever his imam told him. They will tell you it was Judas, that's it. Or he will tell you it was one of the apostles, because that's what his imam told him. He is unaware that nobody had the answer, and we can see that in the tafsirs. And the reason is that the Quran doesn't say what they think it says, as evidenced in Surah 355, in Surah 517, which it clearly says that Jesus died. Anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for the next ones. We have a lot more to show you. Until then, stay well. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
Of 26 of the Quran.
26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
Stay away from these translations. They are propaganda.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?